Hello, and welcome to the Salvation Army in Maple Creek, Saskatchewan. My name is Major Charlotte Dean, and I'm one of two Corps officers here. Today's scripture reading, which the service is based around, is taken from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 22, verses 15 to 22. Then the Pharisees went out and laid plans to trap him in his words. They sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians. "Teacher," they said, "we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not?" But Jesus, knowing their evil intent, said, "You hypocrites, why are you trying to trap me? Show me the coin used for paying the tax." They brought him a denarius, and he asked them, "Whose image is this? Whose inscription?" "Caesar's," they replied. Then he said to them, "So give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, so they left him and went away. It's a difficult week in Jerusalem with Jesus there and the confrontations that are happening. Very prophetic week, one that would, in retrospect, be understood as long anticipated. And today we are living in very prophetic days. Things are happening, tensions are high, and we can certainly look back to Scripture and see and understand that God is with us today, even as then. May God bless you as you worship with us today. Several years ago, in downtown Toronto on Queen Street, the city police had an issue of bikes being stolen. No matter who you were or what kind of bike you rode, if you parked it in this part of town and even locked it, your bike would most certainly be stolen. And they were being stolen within 3 minutes. These guys, gals, whoever they were definitely experts. Desperate for an answer, the police decided to trap the thieves. They set out bikes in their trap zone that were marked with a tracking device. When they followed it, they found the bikes just a few blocks further down the street in a bicycle shop. Who would have ever expected a local retailer to be the thief? In today's text, two groups have joined together to set a trap for Jesus, and none of them expected the answer that he had. Jesus is in his last week of life in Jerusalem, and tensions are high. It is not that everyone knows what is coming, like an announcement was made, on Friday, Jesus is going to be crucified, or he's just facing, capital punishment, execution. In some ways, it looks like the highlights of his life are happening. I guess it depends on who you are. He's just come from an experience of raising a man from the dead by the name of Lazarus, and when he arrives in the city, he's greeted by a crowd of people who are determined to make him king. But the undercurrents are what is happening among the leadership in the city. That's what's making it stressful. They don't take kindly to this man, Jesus, who's formed a following and is causing great distress. He is a threat, and tensions are high all around. I probably don't need to tell you that we are living in a particular time in history when tensions are running high. Not only are we during election decisions, but we are also in the middle of a global pandemic. I am sure you have heard words like plandemic floating around, or have perhaps seen videos and memes implying that there is some kind of conspiracy behind it all. Many will claim to have exposed what they perceive to be the truth in the middle of it. Tensions are at an all-time high. But it does not take a global pandemic or an election to cause this kind of distress. It can also happen during normal times. Fights can erupt over sickness, finances, relationships, and business dealings. The tensions that have come about in the text today have resulted in a number of attempts to disarm Jesus, to trap him in answering questions that would give them a justified reason for arrest, a way to get him out of the public eye at a time when many people from all over are in the city. Their motivation is driven by something we call fear. Fear of an upset in the middle of a political scheme. Fear of what will happen to them personally. Fear of loss of power. Fear in the great unknown. Tax dollars being raised would be slashed. The current power-hungry leaders and tax collectors would be without if Jesus were to become king. Perhaps that would happen because it was led about by some revolt. And surely he would put into power those who opposed the things that they were trying to enforce. Currently, the ruling power is Rome, but the Jews have found ways to assimilate some of them. These would be the ones that were referred to as the Herodians in the text. They have decided to make friends with the current system. There are also the Pharisees in this text, and they found a way to be leaders, have power, have money, and keep a distinct life from that of the Romans. Don't be deceived, though. Their distinct life was not one that was because of holiness. There are underlying desires there too. They too want power, and they too want wealth. Therefore, they challenge on the subject of taxes imposed on them, and they would rather it go into their own coffers, under the guise of religious piety, of course. Oddly, they decide to come together to test Jesus, to challenge him, to trap him, to try and rid themselves of this possible traitor. Neither one of them want to risk the losses that loom in front of them, and so they challenge him. They feared the worst. In our current pandemic and political culture, fear also reigns. Some people are fearful because they are convinced this is all a conspiracy, it's leading to world domination. I spoke with a person recently who feared vaccines because she believed another theory. Fear has taken a hold of political leaders. The possibility of losing real or perceived power to a party with a different ideology is a really big one. Fear of an economic meltdown, of losing money, stability, resources, and power has taken over many minds. When you have always been a first world country, it's hard to imagine anything else. Fear of a virus which has ravaged many places, fear of death, and fear of long-term health concerns. One of the coping mechanisms we often default to when times are uncertain is to find an answer, something that makes sense in our minds and causes us to feel safe. We think, what if they're right? What if this really is all planned? Maybe if I start believing this and stop believing that, my fears will be removed. I will feel more in control if I think I'm right. Or we might stockpile our resources, hoping that even if everyone else suffers, perhaps me and my family will be okay. We too fear the worst. Amid all this fear and the intended attacks, Jesus brings the voice of reason. It's funny, isn't it? That somebody intended for evil. This was a challenge, a trap for Jesus. They wanted to bring him down, ended up being used for good. This text has led to much of our Christian mindset today. When Jesus was attacked with this question, he immediately recognized it for what it was. He said it was unlawful for the Romans to take the taxes. If, he said, it was unlawful for them to take this particular tax, this imperial tax, he would be defying Rome and immediately arrested. If he said to pay the taxes, he was refusing to call them out according to the Pharisees. He was refusing to refer to sin as sin. His response instead offered a balance. He calls for a verbal acknowledgement of the currency and its legal status. Whose picture is on it, he asks. By acknowledging that it is indeed the image and inscription of Caesar, he put in place the authority of government as ordained by God. Not the type of government. This isn't a text saying that it is better to have a democracy or a kingship. Just the authority of whoever was in charge, that God had ordained that. However, at the same time, he pronounced that they ought not to be neglectful of their responses to God as well. Essentially, the coin is made with Caesar's image, but you, he says to them, are made in God's image. You owe it to him to be responsible citizens and to keep your faithfulness. But this does not conflict with paying due respect and taxes to your governing authorities. Jesus offers those who intended to disarm him with an argument they cannot dispute. He offers the option of living peaceably in the world while still serving Yahweh. He will not be held captive by humanity's way of choosing sides when there is not one to choose. The only side we need to choose is to be on God's side. In our world of conflict and tension, Jesus also brings the voice of reason, because we too can be drawn into some kind of war and be tested by people and trapped by people into declaring some kind of an allegiance. We might think we have to follow this person, or we have to follow that person, or believe this idea or another idea in order to be a true believer. But it is true that it is possible to be both a good citizen and a follower of Jesus. God has not lost control of the world, and nothing that we are being asked to do is going to separate us from his love. Just as the hearers of today's word in first century Jerusalem were able to honor leadership while still honoring God, we can too. God has not called us to come out of the world. In fact, his prayer for his disciples was this: "My prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one." That is found in the Gospel of John, chapter 17, verse 15. We do not need to become separatist with our own cult-like following, but rather to live as a light in the world to others who are struggling in the darkness, to live as an example of peaceful, law-abiding citizens. Romans 12:18 says, "If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone." Neither you nor I in Canada are being asked to go against Jesus. We are asked to love God, to love our neighbor. We are asked to seek justice for those who are oppressed, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. None of the requirements that the governing authorities have placed on us in light of this pandemic is endangering our relationship to God or the church. We can still follow God, and we can still follow the law. On a final note, I would like to address this overwhelming need to overcome uncertainty, because much of our response to this is based on that fear. Friends, we need to wait. The answer is most clearly not found in looking through Facebook posts and internet reveals of yet another conspiracy. This is no different than what the Israelite nation did when they were in the desert and facing uncertain times. They did not know when their journey would end, and they wanted answers too. So they pressured their leader, "Find us an answer." They could not wait for God to respond himself, so they turned to other gods. They turned to the ways they had known before, to the worship of idols and to the sacrifice of all they had to make sure they had some tangible answer, something that they could see, hold on to, and know for sure. Why? Because they could not and would not wait. They did not want to wait for God to speak to their leader, Moses. They did not want to wait to see what God would do. It is our turn to wait. We need to learn to live at peace with others, to do our civic duty, while not forgetting to worship God and to love our neighbor. We do not have the answers right now. No, we don't. God's time is not our time. His ways are not ours. But we can trust the people that God has put in charge to find those answers for us and to support them while they do. Let's not turn to the idols of man-made stories, but rather wait on him. Jesus is still Lord, even when you do not feel it, even when you do not see it. He is still above all. God bless you, friends. I will be praying for you every day as we journey this path together.